Why is it so difficult to apologize to others? What is it in the human character that we must always be right? Why is the wrong that we do to others so obvious, but we remain blind to the wrongs we have done to others? The singer Elton John was correct when he wrote in his song, "Sorry is the hardest word." Maybe sincere apologies are hard because they threaten the image we have of ourselves. After all, to admit an error diminishes us. When we apologize, we might have to admit that we have a character flaw, an innate selfishness, a wanton disregard for or willful disinterest in others, a lack of knowledge about a subject, or even a fear that an apology might leave us open to more attacks on who we are as a person. Yes, we work hard to maintain our self-image, and an apology, an admission of error or wrongdoing, reminds us that we are not always who we think we are. One study published in the European Journal of Social Psychology confirms the difficulty of sincerely apologizing when it suggests that people who refused to apologize had more self-esteem and felt more in control and powerful than those who did not refuse. Tyler Okamoto, an author of the study, elaborates, "Apologizing to my wife admits my wrongdoing, but apologizing also gives her the power to choose whether she wants to alleviate my shame through forgiveness or increase my shame by holding a grudge." Our research has found that people experience a short-term increase in their feelings of personal power and control after refusing to apologize. The key words are short-term, but Mr. Okamoto is quick to add there are long-term consequences to this short-term benefit, and the trust on which a relationship is based could be potentially jeopardized. Yes, apologies, sincere apologies are hard when we are wrong, but saying sorry can also be the easiest word spoken when we are wrong. How many politicians, how many institutions, how many companies, how many spouses, how many children regularly issue a perfunctory apology just to get the issue behind them? Just offer an apology. Just say, "I'm sorry," and the crisis is diffused. We don't have to debate the issue. We don't have to examine what really went wrong. We apologize, and it's over. According to Amy Ebisu Hubbard, a professor of communicology at the University of Hawaii, an apology should serve as a launching pad for more elaborate conversations and easing tensions. But too often, our mechanical expression of being sorry does not allow that discussion and introspection to happen. Sorry is indeed the easiest word when we use the apology to circumvent responsibility and repentance, when we use it to avoid the difficult work of repairing a situation. All of us, as the Holy Day liturgy constantly reminds us, have gone astray, have sinned, and have transgressed. And if we have apologized to the offended party in a sincere manner, we hopefully have been able to preserve a cherished relationship. But just as often, we have uttered an automatic "I'm sorry," simply to skirt the issue, because it would be too painful to really confront why we spoke as we did or behave as we did. Offering an authentic "I'm sorry" might require us to confront deeper issues, not just with ourselves, but with another person, which might further antagonize and lead to endless arguments that will never resolve the situation. And so, to keep the peace, to maintain the status quo, to maintain a ceasefire, we say the words, "We must." All of us have been in that situation. Far better to simply offer a robotic apology to the offended party, because being constantly offended is part of their personality. What about the situation, however, where we cannot apologize because of principle? What about the situation where we were right when it would be wrong to speak words of apology and confess wrongdoing? A chaplain colleague, Colonel Andy Meverden, shared once a story about how, in December 2002, several boys were killed during a live fire exercise that the U.S. Army conducted with the new Afghan army. The boys were warned to leave the exercise area, but apparently hoping to find semi-precious stones dislodged by the munitions, they went around the mountain and then back onto the face of the mountain, out of the sight from the soldiers firing the mortars. The first volley struck and immediately killed 4 of the 10 boys, waiting for the opportunities they anticipated after the exercise had ceased. Chaplain Meverden elaborates, "I was involved in receiving the male family members who came to retrieve the lifeless bodies of their sons, brothers, or nephews. I also visited our senior Afghan interpreter. I asked for words of condolence to share with the families and wisdom on how to deal with the tragedy. He told me of the Afghan custom of maharamona, a cultural process with a ceremony used to facilitate reconciliation when unintended tragedies occur. It involved communicating with the offended parties through the village elders that this was an unintentional accident and that we wanted to make things right. Do maharamona. If the offended parties accepted the offer to reconcile, they would respond by hosting a meal with salt in it. The offending party would come, eat the meal, and present a sheep to the family who had suffered the loss. If the offended family accepted the sheep, maharamona, reconciliation, had occurred. With a process now in place to deal with the death of these innocent boys, the chaplain relates that he went to see one of the team sergeants. Sergeant Moses's reaction was not unexpected. I'm not going to sit with those fathers and apologize for what happened. We didn't do anything wrong. It was their fault for coming around back into the firing range. No one knew that they were there. We've got nothing to apologize for. Chaplain Meverden agreed. I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm simply asking you to sit, man to man, father to father, and tell them that you regret their loss. That's all. The meeting date was established. Chaplain Meverden greeted the bereaved families. Many of us are fathers too. And if our sons were taken from us in this tragic way, we would be broken beyond belief. We'll never know what they might have grown up to be: a teacher, an engineer, a medical doctor, a general, a president. But we have come for a few moments to share your pain. Chaplain Meverden relates what happened next. With tears streaming down his cheek, Sergeant Moses cried out, "Please forgive us. We didn't know they were up there. We couldn't see them and didn't know until it was too late." The men of both teams, who had primary responsibility for that live fire training exercise, as well as the emergency medical response, exposed their hearts. All spoke in gentle, humble words. Near the end of the hour-long conversation, the Afghan father spokesman, who had lost both his son and his nephew, motioned with his hand that he wanted to speak a concluding word. All eyes turned to him. "We know that you did not intend to kill our sons, that it was an accident. You have done your jobs well. Now, go home with no heaviness of heart." I have often wondered if Abraham parted with Isaac that day on the mountain with any heaviness of the heart. In Abraham's mind, he was clearly right. Why would there be a need for an apology? God gave the command, Abraham followed that order, and the impact of this ordeal on Isaac was simply ignored. Many commentators are quick to point out that after the ram was sacrificed in place of Isaac, Isaac and Abraham each go their separate ways and never speak to each other again. But what if Abraham had turned to Isaac and said, "I apologize for what I had to do to you, even though it was not my choice, and I am sorry for what I had to do to you, did to you." How different this relationship would have been had Abraham as a father given Isaac the opportunity to express what he was feeling? What if Abraham and Isaac did maharamona? What if Abraham had asked Isaac what he could do to make a better future together? What if Abraham had turned to Isaac and said that he too felt deep pain and distress? They part ways, and their relationship seems to be irreparably fractured. Abraham firm in the conviction that he is right, no apology necessary, and oblivious to Isaac's trauma, the unintended consequences. And too often, we behave similarly. We know, even though it is sometimes difficult to admit, when our wrongdoing has been intentional. When in anger we utter derogatory and hurtful words. When in business we took advantage of a situation. When in our professional lives we were manipulative. We know when we have done wrong, and we know the difference between a sincere, heartfelt apology and an apology that is designed simply to move on. But too often, we are insensitive to what our rightness does to others, and our refusal to do maharamona, to right a situation even when we were not wrong, fractures cherished relationships and pits loved ones against each other. There are certainly times when we need to be firm in our rightness. Our Holy Day liturgy presents a litany of sins for which we need to make amends. We read about the sin of arrogance and being narrow-minded. But we could argue that there are times when these behaviors can be right. What if our narrow-mindedness ensured high ethical standards because we refuse to do what everyone else is doing? What if our arrogance gave someone with a lack of confidence the inspiration to pursue their own dreams and successes? What if behavior toward a child was perceived as mean, but it was the right approach because it helped the child deal with a dilemma that he or she had to solve by themselves to become a more functional person? These behaviors of narrow-mindedness and arrogance and being stern are not necessarily sins in and of themselves, but they can become sins when used recklessly, when we act without considering the implications of our rightness. The biblical story about Abraham and Isaac on Mount Moriah clarifies an important truth for us. We can be right and also wrong. In how many families is unity and harmony on life support because we were right, but we failed to see what we, in our rightness, did to others? In how many marriages are there partners who have become more like roommates than soulmates because we were right, but did not approach the other person the right way with gentle words and thoughtful actions? How many parents have spoken words that were necessary but too harshly without considering feelings and knowing all the facts? Was the way we dealt with the issue the best way to deal with the issue? Right in principle, no apology needed. But were we right in practice? Could we have done more to feel the pain of the other person? Did we consider the unintended consequences of our rightness? Could we have been less self-righteous and less judgmental? Was our anger or arrogance or narrow-mindedness used properly? Yes, we were right. But the relationship is no longer right. The next time Isaac and Abraham are together is at Abraham's funeral. Call it what you want. Maharamona, reconciliation, reconnecting, making the relationship right. Whatever we call it, and however we think it should be done, we can be sure that it will never work unless we are willing to utter a sincere and heartfelt "I'm sorry," unless we are willing to right what went wrong, even though we were right. Abraham dies, never having reconciled with his son Isaac. A stark reminder to all of us that if we truly want to mend a relationship that has been fractured because of our rightness, the time is now, while we still can. Shabbat Shalom to all of you. Shana Tova, a good year and a year of good health.